Welcome to our exploration of sociological theory. Today, we're diving into Chapter 1, which serves as our foundation for understanding what sociological theory is, how it's created, and why it matters. This chapter will give you the tools to think critically about the theories we'll study throughout the semester. We'll spend about 2 hours exploring these fundamental concepts, so get comfortable as we build the groundwork for everything that follows. These objectives will guide our discussion today. Notice that we're not just memorizing definition. We're developing critical thinking skills about how knowledge is created in sociology. By the end of the class, you should be able to evaluate theories critically and understand the political and social context that shape theoretical development. Let's start with something familiar. You're already theorist. Every day you develop explanations for social phenomena. When you wonder why your parents have a good relationship, you might theorize it's because they have similar personalities, or good communication skills, or shared interest. When you speculate about whether your favorite sports team will win, you're theorizing about teamwork, leadership, and performance under pressure. The text uses the example of China and war. You might theorize that economic prosperity reduces the likelihood of conflict. These everyday theories deal with the same social realities that professional sociologists study, but there are important differences in how we approach them. Here's where we see the difference between your everyday theorizing and what sociologists do professionally. First, sociologists are more disciplined and self-conscious. They follow established methods and are very well aware of their theoretical approach. Second, they do not start from scratch. They build on the work of previous thinkers. As Isaac Newton said, "If I have seen the future, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants." Third, while you might have casual observations, sociologists gather data systematically. Though the text notes this data is often less extensive than what lay people might have. Fourth, sociologists publish their work to be critiqued by peers. It goes through a rigorous review before being accepted. Finally, sociologists think more broadly about social issues, while individuals often focus on personal, narrow concerns. This is a fascinating tension in sociology. The text points out that feeling strongly about an issue can be a powerful motivator. It drives sociologists to do the sustained work and develop theoretical insights. Marx is a perfect example. His strong feelings about worker exploitation under capitalism motivated his pioneering work, which remains influential today. However, the same strong feelings may have prevented him from seeing some of the positive aspects of the capitalist system. This tension never fully goes away. Sociologists must balance their personal investment with scholarly objectivity. It's about being passionate but not blind, engaged but still critical. One of the beautiful things about sociology is that we study everything, and I do mean everything. While some might think sociology only deals with big topics like politics or economics, we also theorize about seemingly mundane activities. Sociologists have written extensively about fast food restaurants, credit cards, and shopping malls. Why? Because these everyday phenomena reveal important patterns about social relationships, power, culture, and social change. A McDonald's restaurant isn't just a place to eat. It's a site where we can study standardization, globalization, labor practices, and cultural change. This broad scope is what makes sociology so rich and relevant to daily life. Norbert Elias provides a perfect example of how sociologists find big insights in small behaviors. Between the 13th and 19th centuries, he tracked changes in what we consider proper behavior. Things like not picking your nose at the dinner table, not spitting in public, proper table manners. While these might seem trivial, Elias showed they reflected massive changes in social structure. As societies became more interdependent, people had to be more sensitive about their behavior around others. The development of what we call civilization wasn't just about technology or politics. It was about how people learned to control their bodies and emotions in increasingly complex social situations. This is sociological theory at its best, finding profound insights in everyday life. Georg Simmel had a brilliant insight that shapes how sociologists work today. He argued that the social world is composed of an endless series of interconnected relationships. Every social act, from buying coffee to getting married to voting, is part of this vast network of relationships. This means that any given behavior can serve as a way in to understand the entirety of the social world. Sewell chose to focus on money and relationships because he saw these as particularly revealing entry points. But the principle applies broadly. Whether you're studying education, religion, family, or work, you're really studying the whole social world from a particular vantage point. This is why sociologists can spend entire careers studying seemingly narrow topics. They're not really narrow at all. Now we get to our formal definition of sociological theory. Notice it has three components. First, systematization. Theories help us organize and make sense of the vast amount of information about social life. Without theories, we just have random facts. Second, explanation. Theories help us understand why social phenomena occur. Why do some societies have high crime rates? Why do some people conform to group pressure? Third, prediction. While not fortune telling, good theories help us anticipate what might happen under certain conditions. If we understand how social movements develop, we can better predict which movements might be successful. Most theories discussed in this book meet these criteria to a high degree, though some focus more on one component than the other. So now I need to be honest about how theory actually gets created. The five characteristics I outlined earlier represent an ideal, what sociological theory should look like at its best. But reality is messier. Some theorists are quite undisciplined in their approach. Some don't carefully study the work that came before them. Some rely on limited or unsystematic data. Personal experiences and biases do creep into theoretical work, and just because something gets published doesn't mean it's high quality. Our text wants us to understand that this gap between ideal and reality is there, so we can be critical consumers of theory. We should hold theories to high standards while recognizing that the theory creation process is inherently human and therefore imperfect. This is where our discussion gets really interesting and potentially uncomfortable. Our text argues that what becomes recognized as, quote, important theory isn't just about intellectual merit. Political factors play a huge role. Historically, theories reflecting conservative political orientation were more likely to become part of the canon than radical theories. Structural functionalism, which tends to emphasize social stability, was more readily accepted than Marxian theories that emphasize conflict and change. Similarly, theories produced by white men were more likely to be recognized than those by women or people of color. This does not mean these excluded theories were inferior. Often they were simply challenging to existing power structures. But we're seeing the change now, but slowly. This is a crucial point about how sociology actually works that students often don't realize. Theories don't just succeed or fail based on their scientific merit alone. They rise and fall in popularity based on social, political, and generational factors. So Parsonian functionalism dominated American sociology in the 1950s and 60s because it fit the optimistic, stability-focused mood of post-World War II America. But by the 1970s, with social movements, civil rights struggles, and the Vietnam War protest, functionalism seemed irrelevant to understanding social conflict and change. It was heavily criticized and largely abandoned, although it has had some revival recently. Similarly, Marxist theory was marginalized during the Cold War when being associated with Marx could damage your career. But it resurged during the social upheavals of the 60s and the 70s. It declined again after the fall of the Soviet Union, but has seen renewed interest since the 2008 financial crisis. The other reality is that sociologists are humans. They're drawn to theories that resonate with their personal experiences and worldview. A sociologist who grew up in poverty might find Marx's analysis of class exploitation compelling, while someone from a stable middle class background might prefer theories that emphasize social integration. This isn't bad necessarily, but it means that theoretical development is influenced by who sociologists are as a people, not just by objective scientific criteria. One of the most significant developments in contemporary sociology has been the rise of multicultural social theory. For most of sociology's history, the field was dominated by white, male, heterosexual perspectives. This wasn't necessarily conscious exclusion, but it meant that huge swaths of human experience were ignored or marginalized. Starting in the 1970s, feminists began complaining that sociological theory had been largely closed to women's voices. Well, this opened the floodgates. We've seen the emergence of feminist theory, critical race theory, queer theory, and many other perspectives that center previously marginalized voices. This isn't just about political correctness. These perspectives have genuinely generated new insights about how society works. Multicultural theories have several distinct characteristics that set them apart from traditional approaches. First, they reject the idea that any single theory can capture universal human experience. They argue that different groups have fundamentally different experiences that require different theoretical approaches. Second, they're not trying to be objective in the traditional sense. They explicitly seek to empower marginalized groups and create social change. Third, they blur the boundaries between academic theory and political activism. Fourth, they've made the intellectual world more open and diverse, bringing in voices and perspectives that were previously excluded. Finally, they tend to be highly critical of existing social arrangements and recognize that all knowledge is shaped by particular historical and cultural context. Let me give you a concrete example of how multicultural theory works. Stephen Seidman's queer theory challenges traditional ways of thinking about sexuality. Classical sociological theory tends to treat sexuality in binary terms. You're either a heterosexual or homosexual with fixed, clear identities. Seidman argues that all identities are actually multiple, composite, unstable, and exclusionary. Your sexual orientation intersects with your race, your class, your nationality, your gender, and age in complex ways. A black, lesbian, woman's experience isn't just the sum of being black plus being lesbian plus being a woman. These identities interact in ways that create unique experiences. Rather than accepting the heterosexual homosexual binary, queer theory seeks to develop more complex, nuanced understandings that can accommodate the full range of human, sexual, and gender experiences. W.E.B. Du Bois represents an early example of multicultural social theory, although he predates that term. Unlike other prominent black leaders of his era, Du Bois was born free in the North and received elite education. He has a Harvard PhD and studied in Berlin. This gave him unique insights into both black and white America. His work, particularly the Philadelphia Negro, was groundbreaking urban ethnography that studied black communities with the same rigor applied to white communities. His black reconstruction challenged dominant historical narratives about the post-Civil War period. Throughout his work, Du Bois demonstrated that studying society from the perspective of marginalized groups reveals things that are invisible from the dominant perspective. His concept of the color line remains influential in understanding American society. Let me orient you to how this book is organized because it will help you understand where we're going this semester. The book is divided into two main parts. Part one covers classical foundations. Well, we need to understand the historical roots of contemporary theory. Many current theories build on, react against, or extend classical theories. So we can't understand the present without understanding the past. Part two focuses on contemporary developments organized by different types of theoretical approaches. We'll look at theories that offer broad portraits of society, contemporary grand theories, theories focused on everyday life, attempts to integrate different approaches, feminist theories, and postmodern theories. This organization helps us see both the diversity of the contemporary theory and the connections between the different approaches. One important distinction the book makes is between grand theories and theories of everyday life, though the authors note this distinction is somewhat artificial. Grand theories try to tell the story of large stretches of human history, like Marx's theory of capitalism or Weber's theory of rationalization. They're concerned with big social transformations and broad social patterns. Theories of everyday life focus on more immediate face-to-face interactions, how people present themselves to others, how conversations work, how small groups operate. The distinction is useful for organizing our thinking, but remember that many of the best theories actually work on both levels. Weber's work, for example, connects individual action to large-scale historical processes. The book traces sociology from its classical period through to contemporary developments. The classical period runs roughly from the early 1800s through the 1930s, beginning when Comte coined the term sociology in 1839. Classical theorists were grappling with the massive social changes of industrialization and modernization. The contemporary period begins around 1930s and continues to the present. Contemporary theorists build on classical foundations but also respond to new social conditions and incorporate previously marginalized voices. Importantly, the book emphasizes that contemporary theories aren't just historical artifacts. They remain important and continue to evolve. The theories we will study aren't museum pieces. They are living, breathing attempts to understand our current social world. As we move through the semester, I want you to keep several key themes in mind. First, pay attention to how theories connect to practical real world issues. Theory isn't just abstract thinking, it has real consequences for how we understand and address social problems. Second, think about power and knowledge. Who gets to decide what counts as important theory? And how do these decisions reflect broader power relationships? Third, notice how new theories both build on and break from earlier ones. Intellectual development is both evolutionary and revolutionary. Fourth, observe the expanding diversity of voices in contemporary theory. Fifth, pay attention to different levels of analysis. Some theories focus on individuals, others on groups, societies, or global systems. Finally, always think critically about the strengths and limitations of different theoretical approaches. You might be wondering why any of this matters. Why spend time studying abstract theories when there are concrete social problems to solve? The answer is that theory and practice are intimately connected. Different theories suggest different solutions to social problems. If you think poverty is caused by individual failings, you will propose different solutions than if you think it's caused by structural inequality. Theoretical assumptions shape what research gets funded and how we interpret data. On a personal level, theory gives you tools for making sense of your own experiences and for critically examining the society you live in. It enhances your ability to participate meaningfully in democratic discussions about social issues. Professionally, understanding theory is essential if you're planning graduate study in sociology or even criminology or social work. And it's valuable for careers in social services, policy work, education, and business. So let's take some time to look at the questions and connect the material to your own experiences. I want you to think about the times you've engaged in theoretical thinking. Consider the role of objectivity versus bias in research and reflect on how different social positions might lead to different theoretical insights. Think about these questions. You will see them again. Remember, there are not necessarily right or wrong answers. They're designed to help you think more deeply about the issues we've been discussing. Next class, we'll dive into our first set of classical theories. We'll explore how Marx, Weber, and Durkheim, the founding fathers of sociology, tried to make sense of the massive social changes happening around them. They're not just historical figures. Their ideas continue to shape how we think about contemporary society. Marx's analysis of capitalism remains relevant as we grapple with economic inequality. Weber's concerns about rationalization help us understand bureaucracy and technology today. And Durkheim's focus on social solidarity speaks to contemporary concerns about social cohesion and community. So come prepared to think about how these 19th and early 20th century insights apply to 21st century social life. Let's wrap up by reviewing our key takeaways from today's discussion. We've established that while everyone engages in theoretical thinking, professional sociological theory has distinctive characteristics that set it apart from everyday theorizing. We've explored the complex relationship between personal investment and intellectual objectivity, recognizing that passion can both drive innovation and create blind spots. We have defined sociological theory formally and discussed the gap between idealized and actual theory creation processes. We've examined how political factors influence what gets recognized as important theory and how multicultural perspectives have changed, challenged, and enriched the discipline. Finally, we've emphasized that theory isn't just academic exercise. It has real implications for how we understand and address social problems. This foundation will serve us well as we dive deeper into specific theoretical traditions in the weeks ahead. I know theory can be intimidating at first, but remember that you're already a theoretical thinker. We're just learning to do it more systematically and critically. Next up, Chapter 2, Classical Grand Theories. See you next time.